Yeah, thanks for having me, Alicia. And with a great team of colleagues here at the Times, we looked back at the process by which the government obtained this plane or received this plane from the Qatari government, and the process to get it ready as quickly as possible. Donald Trump made very clear that he wanted this plane ready for America's 250th birthday. And so we analyzed the process by which that plane was made ready for him. What we learned is that the actual process of retrofitting the plane was much shorter than previously known. The contractor that did the process did not actually get it until later in the process. And also it was done sooner than we had expected. And then it went into getting exterior paint jobs and then test flights. So that was one piece of it, just how much quicker they were able to make this plane ready for the president, and then also President Trump's personal involvement. So we know that the president is very obsessed with this plane. He's made that very clear, but he was reviewing all aspects of it in meetings over the course of last summer and into the last spring into the summer. He was given paper printouts of different interior features, exterior features, and also was briefed on what security systems would be part of this plane and was involved in approving everything. So this was not just a project that was done outside the White House. It was a project driven by the White House and led by President Trump. So there was a lot more that we learned as we went back to look at the process of this plane, which has obviously been the subject of some scrutiny given what happened in Turkey.
Well, and one of the things that you highlight here is just the cost, $400 million to wind up with fewer protections than the former Air Force One provided. That's just the amount the administration has publicly admitted spending. Do we actually know, Tyler, how much this has cost taxpayers?
We don't know the full total, and it's good to point that out, Alicia, because that's what they have said it costs. But as part of our reporting, we have identified hundreds of millions of more dollars that were spent to get the president on this plane. And what I mean by that is it wasn't just the retrofitting of the physical plane. It was also purchasing other planes for pilots to test fly, because the systems on the Qatari jet are different than the Air Force One the presidents have been flying for decades. They needed to learn those systems. So it was the $400 million that has been spent on the security systems and the retrofitting of the device, or the aircraft. But there was all this other money spent on preparing pilots and other sort of support systems to be able to fly the president on this plane, which is hundreds of millions more. The exact price has been sort of hidden in various classifications and other sorts of paperwork through the government.
Peter, as someone who has never cared much about the automobiles I come to work in, I have wondered sort of what the obsession is with this plane. And I think you've really gotten at the heart at it. You've written that presidential travel is the ultimate expression of political power. And Trump was clearly eager to show off the trappings of the Qatari jet. Worth mentioning that as the president touched down in Michigan for this speech, one of my producers got in my ear and said, I just want to be clear, this is the old plane. There's a new paint job, so it looks kind of like the new plane, but it's still the old plane. Why does this matter so much to him? And does all of this reporting, do these questions about the security features of this plane undercut sort of what it is that he is trying to communicate with this new plane?
Well, I mean, look, Alicia, you're exactly right. The presidents like Air Force One have for decades, in part because it is a symbol of American power. When that big giant plane lands in a foreign capital or in an American city during a campaign, it conveys, this sort of this majesty, right? And presidents have used that for great political effect, either to impress voters or to impress foreign heads of state. And this president took it the next step, right? Everything with President Trump is sort of on steroids. In his case, he thought it needed to compete with the great royals of the Middle East. Our plane needed to be as, luxe as the Saudis would have or the Emiratis would have. We can't be second rate when it comes to, the gold fixtures and all that. Fine. But the truth of the matter is it was so important to him that they cut the corners. And how do we know they cut the corners? They deny that this plane it doesn't have the security features, as Tyler and our colleagues have reported. And then what do? They just send it back again for more retrofitting, which doesn't sound like a plane that is ready to be flown by the president of the United States. So I think that, they have been all over the map because of a president's individual whim. He wants to be able to fly the plane. He does like the new red, white, and blue colors because it conveys to him, an American, symbol in that sense. But there are reasons why you wait for the plane that they actually want to deliver. When you're president of the United States, you have to be able to run a war potentially from midair and defend that plane in the worst of possible circumstances.
Tyler, the DOJ, they were forced to drop their subpoenas of you. Other reporters who had dug into this plane's shortcomings, we know all of that reporting really got under the president's skin. Can you just give us a sense of why it felt important on the part of those who were willing to speak with you that this information get out there? Like, what is the stakes of this jet?
I mean, as Peter said, it's transporting the commander-in-chief around the world. And there have been times where presidents are on that plane and they need to communicate with staff on the ground, with the military, with other world leaders. As Peter wrote in his great story, it's the command center in the sky, the Oval Office in the sky. It needs to have all of those capabilities. So obviously it's important for that reason that it's secure and safe to transport the president, but it's also not just transporting the president. It's also flying cabinet members, White House staff, people in the line of presidential succession, Secret Service, journalists. Peter and I have both spent many hours flying on these planes. So there is a lot of people that this aircraft transports, and it's a target, right? We saw that in our reporting when the president was in Turkey. There was a credible threat that U.S. officials determined was targeting the president and the plane. And so there is concern about the safety and security of the transportation of the American president.